Good evening and welcome to the Defiance City Council meeting for tonight, March 2nd, 2021. Before we get underway, please bow your heads in prayer. Mr. Corbett, would you please lead us in an opening prayer?
We will do that, sir. Dear Heavenly Father, we're just so grateful for this day you blessed us with, God, and the opportunity to live in a community that we live in that just takes care of one another, and we just thank you for that. Thank you for these men and women around this table tonight that we're going to take care of the city's business. We just pray for your wisdom and God, just ask for your blessing over us and just thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Let the record show that all members of council are present this evening. And would you stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This evening, we have a special treat in that we have a special guest, Kirsty Mack, Executive Director of the Ddvb, here to speak to us this evening. Welcome this evening.
Well, thank you guys very much. I appreciate it. I'm glad to see you all. It's been a long time since I've been at this scary podium here. This thing scares me, so just so that you all know that. For those of you who have not met me in person, my name is Kirsty Mack. I'm the Executive Director of our Defiance Development and Visitors Bureau. What I'm coming to discuss with you today is the first presentation of an expansion of our current DORA district and the current Revitalization District. I will quickly go over each one of those for you, just as a quick refresher for all of you who were a part of the discussions a year and a half ago. And then at any point, if anybody has any questions, please do interrupt me. I do like to talk fast, so sometimes if you're like, well, we gotta go back 3 points, I'm okay with that. So DORA is a downtown outdoor refreshment district. We actually changed it to the Defiance Outdoor Refreshment District, but stayed with the same acronym. That program through the Ohio Revised Code allows outdoor beverages on the sidewalk. So it is an outdoor where you can drink outside. So with all of that, there was a lot of interest in different areas of the state because it was still very new a year and a half ago. So we did a lot of research. We went to a couple of different communities, Toledo and Napoleon, who already had districts in place, discussed with them the benefits, the negativities, all of those things, and then decided at that point that it was something we wanted to pursue. Had a lot of discussions with different restaurant owners, all of that were on council at that time, different businesses, different residents, and all of those things on some of their questions, concerns, etc., on why we would want to do something like this to enact this. The major reason for it was to encourage more walkability, more interest in going into some of the different stores and having a beverage in hand. It also enhanced some of our events, such as the Lilac Festival, because we could have those things available without having to have an individual tent that was closed off in one area. We could promote some of the businesses instead of separating that out. So that's a very quick rendition of what DORA is. Currently, it sits 96 acres within the downtown district from the south end of the Purple Heart Bridge to Don Miller Drive on Clinton, and then does a little bit of jag each direction, east and west, a couple of blocks. It does currently encompass all of the fort grounds, and there are 5 liquor establishments within the area of DORA right now. There are other liquor licenses that are available right now that are attached to other buildings or other current or past businesses, but they are not in use. So there are definitely some additional opportunities there for other people to be using DORA. It has been very well received. We have had no issues. I speak with Police Chief Schaefer very often on if there are any issues during the pandemic. It was very welcome. especially as the businesses were only allowed to be open during a span of time. The summer months were very good when we had farmers markets or the car show. A lot of the businesses saw an uptick in DORA. Very interestingly, I went back in my emails, starting in the end of March last year. I started getting emails from other communities asking about our DORA district. So this time last year, I think they said there were 25 maybe communities who had approved DORA districts. Now, there are over 50. So in a year, we've doubled. So given the pandemic and a lot of the restrictions, the one thing that is becoming very apparent is outdoor dining. So the businesses do not have to expand their licenses into the sidewalks. If the community approves a DORA, they can take advantage of those outdoor dining on the streets. We personally have had over 20 communities contact us as they are enacting their DORA and asking us questions. So we definitely are doing something right. We have a very good website with a lot of really good information and all of those things. So with that, there was some confusion initially that by enacting a DORA, we would also receive liquor licenses. We found out that that was not true. That was very misconstrued and a lot of confusion in the very beginning. But we did find out that we could apply through City Council for a revitalization district. So for those of you, the bigger communities call it community entertainment districts. So if you think like Cedar Point and how you can walk around Cedar Point, there are communities that are very large that you can get these community entertainment districts. For the smaller communities that are less than 125,000, they enacted the opportunity for revitalization districts. So we looked at the boundaries for DORA and we said, well, this would be great for a revitalization district. Because what that did was created 15 additional liquor licenses within those boundaries. So it's not creating a bunch of bars, because one major stipulation with that is that the licenses have to be 75% food sales. So it's not just creating a bunch of bars for people to go in and out of. It really is adding economic development incentive to restaurants. And that is definitely something we know that is needed within our downtown. So that was also passed and approved back May of last year by the state. So we currently do have both. We started some discussions, well, it must have been maybe about a year ago, maybe 10 months ago, about possibly expanding the boundaries of DORA. There was one specific business that was just outside of the boundaries who did have an initial interest in maybe a liquor license, interest in DORA, so we did start the discussion on, do we expand? And if we do, what does that look like? We can only expand or make any amendment to this 2 times in the existence. So it has to be a very serious discussion to make sure we're doing it right and that we don't end up missing something and then have to completely start the whole process over. None of us want that. I'm done looking at the Ohio Revised Code. I don't know how Sean does it as much as he does. My brain is ready to explode. So definitely looking forward to being like, okay, we can put that aside again. So before I go on to the amendment and the expansion, are there any questions about DORA, about the revitalization district? Because we're gonna kind of pair them both together because ideally the boundaries are exactly the same and the purposes kind of coincide together.
Do you have any questions for?
Okay, I wanted to make sure before we move forward. I know there's a lot of information here. So with the expansion, what we're looking to do is the map that is up now shows the projected expanded boundaries. So we're adding just about, I think it's about 18 acres to the current area, but the space that we're adding here, I will actually point at it so that it helps everybody see. So we're expanding here. So south of Don Miller Drive on Clinton Street to the viaduct. So that would encompass all of these businesses here,
and then the depot parkland that is city-owned in that region. Then up to the north, we would be including all of the Purple Heart Bridge, Sensory Effect Park to the west, and then Pontiac Park all the way up to the boundary line where the trees hit for Pontiac Park. And then down here over the East 2nd Street Bridge, including all of Kingsbury Park, except if you can see how we divided it out, the pool is not included. We thought that was very important. Definitely not necessary to be in that region. So we already parceled that off. There will be plenty of signage there so that those lifeguards do not have to deal with that situation. And then over here to the south then, over the bridge and encompassing all of the businesses or the buildings here up to Hopkins Street. So all that grassland there is the projected boundaries. So I believe, I can't remember exactly, but we're close to like 114 or 116 acres of our contiguous 125 that we are allowed for the entire location. One of the main reasons for that was obviously the discussion of those buildings to the south. We obviously like including everything as a downtown district. So how can we continue to do that? We do have currently those 15 liquor licenses that if we could expand the opportunity area, it would just be adding more possibility for people to open the restaurants or to be a part of our confluence area. We're also continuously talking about riverfront development and all of those things. So if we can get more people in and around the rivers, not in the rivers with the Dora Cup to be very specific, but around the rivers, through the parks, walking them, if we're going to benefit them by having a Dora Cup in their hand while they're doing it, I definitely see a possibility for some positivity and more people in and around the parklands. It will also help if there are food trucks at some of these parks, if there is just a general small event going on, people walking their dogs. It was actually amazing how many people walked their dogs and grabbed a Dora Cup and continued walking. Well, we saw that so much during farmers market. I was like, well, this is awesome. That's why we created this in the first place. We also know there are those buildings there on the East 2nd Street Bridge there on the corner, that there are some possibilities there. Who knows what these buildings could turn into if there were some of these possibilities hanging out there to be able to promote, to add more restaurants in our area. So that's what we're looking to bring to the table to all of you, is that expansion of those boundaries. Again, since we can only amend twice, we wanted to look big picture. Instead of only adding a small area, we do have to go through the entire process every time it's amended. So we wanted to make sure that if we're doing it right, and we're looking at everything we possibly can prior to making a choice and then looking back and not being happy with that decision. So I would be happy to answer any questions from any of you on this. I'm always available outside of this as well.
Oh, Mr. Waxler.
I guess our parks all got signs that say no alcoholic beverages.
Right.
I don't really understand why we want to move the Dora district into the parks. There's nobody over there for them to buy alcohol from. There's no Dora places over there.
Right.
So what you're going to run into is you're going to have a lot of people buying a Dora cup and going over there and buying a 12-pack and sitting there filling their cup. That's what I see happening in the park.
I absolutely 100%, because I've even questioned it myself. I've looked and said, okay, there's a lot of space here. You know, you get a drink at Spanky's and you walk to the park, that drink's probably gone.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Now, what we would obviously be looking to promote is, we're already talking about food trucks. We've seen a lot of interest in food trucks already. So if that food truck is over there at Pontiac Park or sitting over at Kingsbury, et cetera, great. Here's an opportunity to grab that drink, go get your food, and sit at the riverfront and enjoy your lunch.
but by the time they walk from here to there, their drink's gone.
It could be gone, that's right.
So,
The space that's the most interesting to me are those buildings there on 2nd Street. On 2nd Street, over the bridge.
those buildings have some definite potential. We really can't build any other restaurants on or around our confluence. Those are the closest we're probably going to get. So there's a huge opportunity there that I agree that if there's no way right now for them to walk over there other than to have the cup and fill it with their cooler. Obviously, that is illegal for everybody. That's FYI, can't do that. But maybe by extending the boundaries, having these as a, hey, FYI, here is an opportunity to get these liquor licenses, which are much less expensive. Maybe we could see some riverfront development in those buildings and see something happen to it.
But you could do those buildings without doing the parks.
Yeah, you can, absolutely you
I mean,
can.
I really think that we're, it looks like we're trying to promote everything downtown to alcohol, tying it all to alcohol. And I don't think that's what we really are intending to do to build our downtown.
Correct. No, I would agree with that.
So, and anything that's gonna happen in those facilities, Pontiac Park has the art park, whatever it is what they have over there. I say we just bring them downtown, close off the streets like we do for the car show or Lilac Festival and everything else, and have it downtown where it's actually helping the merchants.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's just my opinion.
Absolutely.
I don't think we really wanna look at the parks. I mean, I'm afraid that the people are gonna go over there with the door cups, start filling their coolers, and next thing you know, they aren't watching their kids, and we got a kid in the river, or we got something else happening.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, and I will say, that was one of the concerns back when we started Dora as well, was looking at those possibilities of what's gonna happen when this is enacted. And we have not seen those things, even with how Dora has been now. There's definitely a demographic that are using the benefit of the district, which is obviously exactly what we were hoping. We were hoping it was going to be used in the appropriate way. You can't guarantee that ever by any means. We always keep our fingers crossed that people are going to follow rules and directions like they should. The benefit of this is continuing promotion of those riverfront areas in any way we can. And I agree with the why does everything have to revolve around alcohol? Ideally, it's more of a choice. It's offering an option. It's offering the opportunity if you so choose to partake. It's not something that obviously is required.
Right, but like you said, I don't have a problem with them buildings, with it going to them buildings. I don't have a problem with going with D-Town down there.
Yep.
If that's what you're after, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't have a problem with that. But I don't think we need to go out any further. Then we're not really downtown, but the parks are just kind of a sacred place it's a non-alcoholic. All of our parks are non-alcoholic, so that's sign there. That's not what we want our people doing, going sit in the parks, not watching their kids and drink.
Absolutely.
I'm just saying.
Oh, absolutely. No, I would agree.
I don't know. That's just my take on it.
Oh, Mr. Hancock?
A couple things. Is there a deadline for this?
Not a direct deadline.
Okay.
We would love to see this jump ahead of summer. Once the full process is a full approval through you with 3 readings, and then a 30-day wait time before we even get to send it to the state. They were very quick last time on the approval. I don't foresee that being the way it would happen this time.
I guess with our I think this may need some additional discussion.
Absolutely.
And I would recommend that we have a study session if possible, before legislation, if legislation becomes up there. So I would make a motion to have a study session, but I don't want to make that motion if we want to continue a little bit of discussion here.
All right, so we have a pending motion for a study session.
Yes.
Before we entertain it, we'll wrap up people's questions. And Mr. Engel?
Three readings, we could have that all at that time, I guess. I mean, we're gonna have 3 readings on this, and we can study that then, just my opinion, instead of going into an exact study session type thing.
Mr. Corbett?
I'm just curious that how much experience do we actually have with it since we've spent all last summer? I mean, the pandemic shut a lot of stuff down, so you don't really know how it's gonna work exactly because we haven't had enough time to even really tested out.
I would say that we've definitely we saw a major uptick in it over the summer last year, because we hold the cups, and so we know how many cups that have been used. We saw a major uptick in those middle summer months. Obviously, as things got cooler, fall hit, numbers started spiking. We definitely saw a decrease at that point. But with the cruise-ins that were downtown, the incentives that were on with the retail when they started reopening, the farmers markets, the car show, we definitely saw a major uptick in the usage of the cups. We did figure out the best way for refuse to be taken care of. We're continuing the conversation on the recycling program. We have a good direction on where we're going to be going with that. So I would say we've seen some definite increase, and we've learned some things over this summer. And so we have had a summer and a half of it being used.
Okay, so the actual development area you see potential in is just the buildings on the east side of this East Second Street Bridge then? Because you can't go to Pontiac Park.
Correct, there, you
The
can't
ground-
build over there.
Ground across the street's owned by property owners.
Yep.
Kingsbury Park, you can't do anything down there.
Correct, there's the
That
one
area
parcel that you
along-
could.
That area to the south, I guess, is all wetlands.
Correct.
I mean, you can't build there now. 'Cause
Correct.
they tore all those buildings down because it was a flood zone, so.
Correct,
Okay,
yes,
so there's very little potential.
for actual
for
new
actual
buildings,
new
correct,
Okay.
yes. Yes,
Mr. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Esty?
In lieu of the designated area, would people be able to permit areas so that they could do something like adult refreshment stands? I think before the Rib Fest, we used to have people like during the 4th of July, downtown businesses would do their back parking lots and sell food and beer, and people were able to walk around, I guess, or drink it there or whatever. But with the Dora, that might be the extension that people could do in certain areas, if we couldn't extend in those areas like the parks. Because we can't change the parks as far as the as far as alcohol being allowed or not, right?
Right, we've had special permits from the state. I think, and don't quote me on this, it's like an F8 permit or something.
Maybe.
It's like there's a number on it that you can use for special events to submit to the state, and I believe I have to sign off on it, and I think the police chief has to sign off.
Would that be a designated area?
It would be, you would have a designated area that I think we did one in the parking lot behind the McDonald building.
McDonald's is what it was, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a special permit that you can submit to the state and ask for a liquor license for a temporary period of time.
So there are other options that we can do besides, like say, opening it up in a designated area and saying that's something that we could do, but we can't do because it's park or whatever. The other part, if you look at the south of the bridge, off East Second Street, that's where the floodplains, isn't it?
All glaze.
And there's nothing that can be built there, that's what we said earlier, but would that be a permitted area if somebody wanted to use it?
I'm not sure. We'd have to look into that. You're not building a structure, so I think the
Just
flood,
temporary.
yeah.
Okay, that's all I need.
Mr. Engel?
Couple of questions. How far did you say it was gonna go down Hopkins Street?
to Hopkins Street, it would not continue on to Hopkins Street,
Okay.
to the
Okay.
intersection.
Okay.
Yep.
And another thing, let's say for some reason, what we're going to do, if it passes, if it doesn't work like you think, can that be skinned back?
Yes, it can.
Okay.
Yep, it would, if you guys said, whoa, hold on, this is not working, it could be amended again, which would then be the final amendment,
Okay.
which would be perfectly fine, we would go back and,
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Mrs. Crutch.
My question was answered.
Mr. Waxler.
I guess my other question, the thing about, when we started this door, this was to revitalize downtown
Yes.
and part of that whole
Yep.
thing. But as we're doing here, are we getting away from our merchants? When we start doing this and, like you said, well, we can get food trucks down there, which I understand that,
Yep.
everybody's gotta be a business.
Yep.
But we start getting food trucks down there and we're taking away from our local merchants, this was designed to help.
Yes. One of the benefits of having a DORA is having those additional licensures within the DORA. Currently, we have 5. Most locations have 8 to 12, which is where they see the most benefit, because then we have the great opportunity how ours are set up, they're spread out.
Right.
Normally, you have like 3 in a group, and then they're spread out, and then maybe you have 5 down here. So we're lucky where we're at now, but if, let's say, the family video building, let's say that would turn into something that had a license tied to it. That would just be another great opportunity to bring in somebody walking from, let's say, Miami and Erie down 2nd Street because they're headed to the park.
But that's already in the door, right? That building.
It is currently,
Yeah.
yes, exactly. But that would be a great opportunity, and then the bridge buildings there, another great opportunity. We definitely focus on Clinton Street and those immediate 1-block side streets as the main business district. If we can expand some of that and we can look at some of these parklands as huge opportunities, hopefully some of these things that we've been imagining we just found something from 1985 that continued talking about building up the parklands and revitalizing that area, that some of these things may start coming to fruition because more people will be using the area, more of the community support will be there. We're always looking at big picture. How can we look big picture? And sometimes big picture is scary. We definitely know that. We're definitely scared. When we started with this DORA stuff, we went, oh my, this is a big deal. But the more we hear how well it's going for us as well as other communities, if we have an opportunity to expand it and bring more attention to some of the things we want to continue improving, is it a good way to do it?
Yeah, as I said, I don't have a problem expanding it. I just don't think we want to do it in the parks. That's just me.
Mr. Mast?
Is there anything that would eventually permit the food trucks and vendors to actually sell alcohol in a DORA cup?
Not currently. Now, I can't say that would never change. Currently, it has to be a brick and mortar that is stationary within those boundaries. We did look into it because we did have a food truck that was possibly interested, and it was not a possibility to use one of the liquor licenses that is currently available. Now there are licenses for food trucks to be able to sell, but they would not be able to sell out of DORA cups because they are not a permanent structure within those boundaries.
Mrs. Crutch.
When you did the research with the whole DORA beginnings, now could you go back and ask some of those people that if they have DORA expanded into parks also? Have any of those gone into parks?
Not that I did not reach out to any of the other ones. When we worked with Toledo, it was right as they were doing the Hensville expansion. So Toledo has 2 separate areas. They have Adams Street and then they have the Hensville location. They're large enough to be able to have 2 separate ones within their community. We are not. So again, that's part of the reason why we're looking at this area and saying, if we're gonna do it, let's go big and make it everything that it possibly can be within that space, because we don't have an opportunity to break it off into another section of the community. So I could absolutely look into some of them and see what some of their boundaries are. We're working with Salem right now. They've been asking a lot of really interesting questions, and so that's been definitely good to hear from somebody else too.
Any other questions for Mrs. Mack? If not, we have a motion for a study session in these regards.
Correct.
Mr.
I'll
Uresti?
second.
Second, Mr. Uresti?
Yeah.
All those in favor of discussing this at a study session, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Right, we will schedule this for a study session.
Sounds good. Well, if you guys have any other questions for me, anytime, let me know. One other thing I
Yeah.
wanna throw out at everybody is Restaurant Week starts Friday. If you haven't seen, we're really excited about it. So we're creating this whole thing, focusing on restaurants throughout the whole county, so.
And that is for 1 week, is that correct?
It is, it's 9 days.
Okay.
So it does include 2 Fridays and 2 Saturdays for especially those businesses that are only open Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We wanted to make sure the opportunity was there for everybody to travel, if necessary, to those locations from different areas of the county. So we're definitely excited about that one.
Thank you.
Mr. Uresti?
Absolutely.
Would you be available for a study session?
Yes.
Okay.
You see, that's such a good question, I was just about to ask.
Yeah, and the other part to it is that you're talking about different areas. And what are the possibilities that for a study session, it'd be great that if you're able to give us a vision as to what are the developments in those areas and the usage and how the expansions would, again, like what you said, benefit the entire package.
Sure.
And so that we have a good idea of where we stand with this and you know, go from there.
Absolutely.
Great.
We need a date.
Next Tuesday is the 9th. The fourth Tuesday is the 23rd. Did you have in mind when you would prefer study
No,
session? Is there a date that is more
Basically,
workable?
Well, can she
Kirsty's
get her
schedule.
information? You wanna get some information?
Is a
before-
week enough time?
Yeah, I
or-
would think so.
Okay, we could do that,
Next Tuesday, the 9th?
that's fine.
Mr.
What would you-
O'Donnell, our study sessions are usually after our legislation. Can, it
Yes,
be
but
moved up so we don't have to go through?
the council has the ability to amend the order in rule, I'll get you that rule number. It's 12. Twelve 12.3, in the absence of objection, the president or other officer presiding may direct that an item of business be taken up at an earlier or later time than provided by this rule in the agenda. So, Mr. President, you can direct the study session at that meeting to be first.
All right, and just a heads up, I will probably do so unless there's an objection. If there's an issue, just bring it up and we can discuss it.
President Master, along with that, do we also use utilize our liaisons? Do we fall under a particular category? Or, cause I,
Study session, don't do
study
that.
session would be okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you guys very much.
And thank you. I've reviewed the index minutes for the city council meeting for February 23rd, 2021. Do we have a motion to amend or change the index minutes? If we don't, I'll approve them. Do we have a request for liaison meetings or reports? And do we have any council comments? Mrs. Crutch?
Just real quick on the Dora, if you go to your Dropbox under Dora, this has all the information that Lisa had up. So if you guys look through that, it might answer some questions too.
Thank you. Mr. Mast?
Just real quick check, I have a few people have asked about a timeline on the cleanups regarding the burnt buildings. I don't know if there's any.
We have a meeting tomorrow on that, Mr. Mast. After that meeting, I will email council and let you know, but the owner has been waiting for this meeting to commence. I believe he's engaged a contractor, so it shouldn't be long. You mean the one over here in Jackson, correct?
And east side as well.
I can't answer the east side as readily as I can, but I'll follow up on that for you.
I will say, Mr. Mass, we have a fund that actually, the owner's insurance company has to contribute to, so all these are cleaned up. And then once that money's forwarded to us, we make sure that those property matters are taken care of. And it's when they're taken care of satisfactory that we release that money back, just so you know that.
Mr. Hancock?
With these weather changes that we've had, recently, are citizens able to still utilize the report a pothole if they see any conditions on a street?
Used it a half dozen times this week.
Okay, just wanted to clarify and be sure. There are a few that have showed up. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments from council? Currently, there's nothing on my desk. On to the Board of Control. Welcome back, Mayor McCann.
Thank you, President McMaster. I have a few things. Later this week, I know I will be reading to Mrs. Hauk's third grade class, but not the same one that prepared this book. Tonight's reading is by KJ. KJ says, my community helper is a doctor. A doctor will perform minor surgeries if needed. A doctor will use scrubs, a mask, and tennis shoes. Doctors will check if you are in good health, and that again is by KJ. And my daughter's a doctor, and she wears Crocs, not tennis shoes, because she says she can put them in the dishwasher. And that's all I have to say about that. I don't eat her dishes, off her dishes. I thought about the subject I'm going to talk about at this point and how I should approach it. And so I'm going to approach it this way. We need the community's help. We have an issue that has been brought up in this room on several occasions, and we've attempted to address it. And so I'm going to just put it to you this way. A lot of people own dogs, and I'm happy for people that can own dogs. I think Lori and I wish we could own a dog, but our lifestyle doesn't really allow us to do that. And they walk their dogs, and dogs sometimes do what dogs need to do, and sadly, they aren't cleaning it up. And it was brought to my attention again over the weekend, specifically Riverside Park. So I took the occasion with the nice weather on Monday, yesterday, to take a drive down to Riverside Park and walk around. And let's just say I think I know my poo, and I know the difference between dog poo and cat poo and deer poo. And there's a lot of dog poo down at Riverside Park, and I know it's a problem at our other parks. So at this point, I'm just asking for the community's help with this. I have received calls since I've been mayor from people saying, would you please talk to my neighbor about the fact that they walk their dog. One day last week, Thursday or Friday morning, I was walking into Bud's. I had to dodge a little poo on the sidewalk on the State Bank's property. And so we just need to be more diligent, more thoughtful. Most of our parks, including Riverside, have the little doggy stations that people can use. You know, you leave the house, you're in a hurry to take your dog for a walk, and you say, I forgot my grocery bag to clean up after my dog. Most of our parks have those. So at this point, I will just say, I need your help. We need your help. Because the alternatives to you helping us, I don't like. So we'll leave it at that. Compost site will start to open up on March 16th. It will be open Tuesday and Thursday, 12 to 6. Saturdays from 9 to 2:30. There's a ton of information on our website, what you can and can't take to the compost site. And I'm sure there are people that are just waiting for that to happen. I was asked to bring to the community's attention something that I think is pretty neat. I didn't have a lot of involvement in this. Mr. Leonard had more involvement, but we were recognized by the Ohio EPA for our efforts taken to protect the city's source of drinking water through completion of a drinking water source water protection plan. And Joe Ewers at the water plant, who I talked about a couple weeks ago, and Jen English, who you all know, worked very hard on this, and hard enough that we received recognition from the Ohio EPA. So I think Mr. Leonard and I are both very proud of Joe and Jen, and whether you want to add anything to that.
No, I think you said it accurately. These people work very hard on water quality. We work very hard on discharges and the sewer system as well. And I will say this, when it comes to the utilities in this town in water, there's nobody better than Adam McDowell. And in wastewater, there's nobody better than Mark Leonard. These guys are really well prepared in doing their job, and they're excellent at what they do, and they're very knowledgeable. So they and their staff, people like Joe Ewers, Kevin Connor, we have Jen English, who really is looking more at stormwater, but she also looks at what we call sustainable systems. So these people are top notch, and they do an excellent job. So well said, Mayor.
Jen fills a lot of voids.
Yep, absolutely.
And lastly, today we received a visit from Andy Lorenz with Regional Growth Partners. Regional Growth Partners is the regional arm of Jobs Ohio. Andy's been our liaison for a couple years now. Good guy, lives up in Perrysburg. But the city of Defiance was awarded from Site Selection Magazine, which is exactly what it sounds. It's where site selectors go. It's where companies go when they're looking to expand their operations. So we received a top 100 micropolitan. I would encourage all of you to go to Site Selection Magazine and read more about it. I will try and get you the links that explain this better than what I can, but a micropolitan is a community between 10,000 and 49,999, but you can round that off to 50,000 if you want. But it's a real honor. I think this is a credit to the team we have here at City Hall. I know Jerry Hayes has retired recently, and of course, Erica Willits and her team out at Credit Adjustments. So we're pretty proud of this. We're on a list, and anytime you make these lists, it draws the attention of site selectors and companies that are looking to expand their operations. That's something to be proud of. And I believe Mr. O'Donnell, Mr. President, will request an executive session on my behalf. So that's all I have, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Leonard.
Nothing today, Mr. President. Thank you.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Mr. President, I'd like to request an executive session to consider the purchase of property for public purposes where premature disclosure of information would give an unfair advantage or bargaining advantage to a person whose personal private interest is adverse to the general public interest. Madam Clerk, that's section 121.22 G2 Ohio Revised Code.
We have a request for an executive session. Do we have a motion for executive session?
So moved.
Mr. Engel?
Second.
Second, Mr. Hancock?
Mrs. Crutch?
Yes.
Mr. Engel?
Yes.
Mr. Corbett?
Yes.
Mr. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Aresti?
Yes.
Mr. Mast?
Yes.
And Mr. Waxler?
Yes.
Okay, so this evening, before we adjourn, we will have an executive session. Only one.
That's all I have.
All right. And Mr. Leonard?
I have nothing at this time.
Well, we have a couple issues of legislation for consideration this evening. Mrs. Elders, would you mind reading the first caption?
Third reading as amended, an ordinance authorizing the use of CARES Act funding to provide economic assistance to Defiance Area YMCA as amended.
Mr. Leonard?
I'll take it, but honestly have nothing to add. Nothing has changed since this thing was brought back as an amended ordinance 2 meetings ago.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Leonard, or what are council's wishes? We're up for the third reading.
Those are the questions most on the go.
No.
Motion adopt.
Adopt.
What?
Adopt.
Oh, motion to adopt, I'm sorry.
So we have a motion to adopt, Mr. Waxler. Second,
Second.
Mr. Hancock.
Mr. Corbett,
No.
Mr. Hancock,
No.
Mr. Rusty,
Yes.
Mr. Mast,
No.
Mr. Waxler,
No.
Mrs. Crutch,
No.
and Mr. Engel.
No.
Yep, so the ordinance has failed.
First reading by caption only, an ordinance amending chapter 1333 of the codified ordinances to reflect recent adoption of a revised flood insurance study and a flood insurance rate map by the Federal Emergency Management Agency and declare an emergency.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before I begin, I just wanted to let you know, any of you have the option to make a motion to have the bill read in its entirety.
And
I don't hear any takers. It's only 41 pages.
Yeah.
that we didn't know.
The city applies a amalgam, or it's a big word, a combination of planning and zoning regulations, as well as our floodplain development chapter, chapter 1333, to regulate and, if you will, restrict development in our floodplains for obvious reasons. And when I say floodplains, I mean flood hazard, what we call flood hazard areas, subject to flooding every 100 years. It doesn't mean it might happen twice in 100 years. It might not happen for a couple of 100 years and then happen all at once, but on average, once every 100 years. The city and other agencies, government agencies, like to restrict that because it's expensive to replace when the floods do come, as well as pushes the water onto other properties. So, but we do take a particular focus on that 100-year flood area, hazard area. FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, administers what's called the National Flood Insurance Program. You're all familiar with that. And this year they were updating the flood insurance risk map to change, amend, expand those flood hazard areas. And that takes effect March 9th of this year. So as part of that, those flood insurance, National Flood Insurance Program requirements, every local government has to have restrictions on building inside those zones. And those restrictions have to meet FEMA's strict requirements, as well as we're subject to ODNR review here at the state. And let me tell you, they are strict. We've gone through several rounds back and forth of edits with both FEMA and ODNR to get all regulations in compliance. We chose not to just do a blanket copy of the model. We wanted to kind of work them into our unique code scheme. It took years for my predecessor to develop, and we think it works pretty well. I would caution you that should council fail to adopt these regulations tonight, that risks leaving these property owners exposed and possibly not able to have their properties insured under the National Flood Insurance Program. As you know, it's very difficult, very expensive to get flood insurance on the marketplace. Really, the only places you even see it are industrial and agricultural uses. So we would request this ordinance to be passed as an emergency due to the desire to help those properties maintain their eligibility for flood insurance.
Thank you, Mr. O'Donnell. Do we have any questions for Mr. O'Donnell or Mr. Hancock?
With the revisions of the flood map, have you noticed any expansions in any areas with the flood map itself? And how does that affect the current structures that are there within that flood area?
Sure. There have been some expansions down at, if you go along like Riverside, on the actual side by the river. And I believe across on the other bank, there's been slight changes there. There's been some changes up west of the Purple Heart Bridge, and we're talking a couple feet. But how it impacts the existing property owners, is if they were to either A, rebuild, or B, make a substantial improvement. And this ordinance defines substantial improvement as repair, reconstruction, rehabilitation, addition, or other improvement of a structure, the cost of which equals or exceeds, 1/2 of the market value of the structure before the start of construction of such improvement. So if you were a property owner that needed to do that, this code establishes a scheme of approvals that you would have to go through, both with the city and with the state and federal.
Moving forward, now if I wasn't in the floodplain and I now am, is there gonna be a requirement to have coverage, or is there a grandfather?
No, there's no grandfather. If you are in the floodplain, then you will be required to have coverage if that's a requirement of your lender.
For example, if I lived on Riverside and they expanded it 2 feet and they came on my property, I would be required to have that.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
If he has a mortgage.
Right, if your lender requires that. Again, that's kind of between you and your lender.
Sure, sure. And then, like I said, the expansion of the floodplain was only minimum. It wasn't like we covered another additional block, of that such.
I did not see areas where whole broad swaths were included.
Okay.
Keep in mind, Defiance is not like Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Like, it's an area where the waters rise slowly. So these changes are gonna be incremental. They're gonna creep and crawl and ebb and flow.
And we'll have mud in our pool. I mean, that's just situation. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Engel?
No other questions, most have been a call.
We have no other questions. We have a motion to suspend and call Mr. Engel. Second, Mr. Waxler.
Mr. Rusty?
Yes.
Mr. Mass?
Yes.
Mr. Waxler?
Yes.
Mrs. Crutch? Yes. Mr. Engel?
Yes.
Mr. Corbett?
Yes.
And Mr. Hancock?
Yes.
Motion adopted.
Motion to adopt, Mr. Waxler.
Second.
Second, Mr. Mast.
Mr. Mass?
Yes.
Mr. Waxler?
Yes.
Mrs. Crutch?
Yes.
Mr. Engel?
Yes.
Mr. Corbett?
Yes.
Mr. Hancock?
Yes.
And Mr. Rusty?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
First reading by caption only, a resolution in support of the draft solid waste management plan proposed for the joint solid waste management district of Defiance, Fulton, Paulding, and William County, Ohio.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. President. Section 3734.54 of the revised code requires all of the state solid waste management districts to develop plans. The goals of these plans being to reduce the amount going into landfills, encourage recycling, and establish criteria for the disposal of certain hazardous materials. It also includes how municipalities should dispose of some of their waste byproducts from water treatment, water pollution control, wastewater, those processes. The joint 4-county solid waste management district every so often approves, renews their plan. They are proposing a revised plan for you. We have it here. They gave it to us on a flash drive, and I'm happy to share it with anyone who might want to see it if they so desire. They're just requesting a resolution in support of their plan that will help them with their submission to the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. O'Donnell in regards to this resolution?
No further questions, motion to suspend and call.
Motion to suspend and call Mr. Waxler.
Yes. Oh, never mind. Go ahead.
Second.
Second, Mr. Engel.
Mr. Waxler?
Yes.
Mrs. Crutch?
Yes.
Mr. Engel?
Yes.
Mr. Corbett?
Yes.
Mr. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Rusty?
Yes.
And Mr. Mass?
Yes.
Motion adopted.
Motion to adopt, Mr. Engel. Second, Mr. Mast.
Mrs. Crutch?
Yes.
Mr. Engel?
Yes.
Mr. Corbett?
Yes.
Mr. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Rusty?
Yes.
Mr. Mass?
Yes.
And Mr. Waxler?
Yes.
Okay. And this resolution is adopted. And before we stretch our legs for a moment and enter executive session, does anyone have any questions or concerns, any emails from citizens for citizen concerns? I do not. All right, well then let's stand and stretch our legs for a few minutes and then we'll enter executive session.